Hello. Today we'll be talking about the Jesse Wells song Whistle Boeing. It is about the whistleblowers that raised alarms against practices for the Boeing company back in, I believe, 2023, 2024, around there. And this video, I feel like, will be a lot more specific fact-based and less my opinion about what the song is talking about, because this song is very factual, I feel. It's talking about what happened to these guys. And to start with, he talks about Joshua Dean. And so the line is, Joshua Dean had a memory keen, he was strong and he ran every day. But his lungs turned to goo and he had a stroke too. At 46, he was sent on his way. Now, in a lot of the research that I had, he was actually 45. So I don't know if that was like for lyrical flow. Because I feel like at 45, he was something like, it doesn't sound as good. Or if it was an error, but semantics. He was actually 45. But, and so specifically, Joshua Dean worked for Spirit Aerosystems in Wichita, and he had filed complaints to the Federal Aviation Administration, or the FAA, after witnessing errors in the manufacturing of fuselage parts for the 737. After this, in a life of good health, he fought a bout of illness for 2 weeks where he had influenza B, a staph infection, pneumonia, and a stroke. He, literally fell apart, which doesn't typically happen to most people, I feel. It's a bit extreme. And then the other person he talks about in this is John Barnett, or Swampy was his nickname. So the line is, "Oh, Swampy Barnett loved his mama, and he took a lot of pride in his work. He found 300 reasons why a plane couldn't fly, and now he's over his head in the dirt." Now, specifically, what I have written for this guy is, John Barnett worked for Boeing for 30 years and retired in 2017. In 2019, he filed complaints stating there were issues with the oxygen masks, substandard parts in the 787, and incomplete tracking of parts. He sued the company and continued to fight in a legal battle. He was testifying against the company just a day before he was found dead in his truck of a self-inflicted wound. So I believe it was a gunshot, but different sources didn't specify, so I'm not 100% sure on that. But he was found in his car in the parking lot of the hotel he was staying at, which is also a little strange, because I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most people that are going to commit suicide before they testify against a company, which, one, I don't feel like they're going to do that, but two, why would they do it in their truck in the parking lot of the hotel? That just seems a little odd to me, if you ask me, but what do I know? And so kind of my next point with this is that obviously these deaths are highly suspicious, especially the second one, considering that it was something more direct that someone could do to someone. Obviously, someone can shoot someone. So is that a self-inflicted wound? Is it not? Who's to say? Because, like with the other guy, I remember when this was kind of a big topic of discussion. Lots of people argued for the first guy, Joshua Dean, that how could they have made him sick? And I mean, personally, I feel like there's probably poisons and stuff that could do that, but lots of people argued that it would just not have been as practical, and why would they go about killing him in that way and then just shoot this guy? Which I kind of get that point, but I also feel like pointing out the suspiciousness of these deaths is important, and it's definitely worth discussion, and I feel like we discussed it a lot when it first happened, but at the end of the day, nothing came of that, and there was very little, resolution, which I will talk about in a moment. But I feel like a lot of this song specifically talks about how, these whistleblowers would have affected the bottom line of the company a great deal. These whistleblowers, if true, which I'm just gonna probably assume they were, because why would you lie about that sort of thing? It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, Joshua Dean was fired from his job, and then John Barnett was absolutely slandered by Boeing, and his reputation in the industry was not quite tarnished. These people still took him seriously, but they definitely made an effort to tarnish his reputation. And so why would they lie about these things? That just doesn't make sense to me. And at the end of the day, it would have affected shareholders' opinions of Boeing, because if people were to not feel safe flying in their planes, which was a huge experience, many people did not feel safe flying in Boeings. But at the end of the day, the airline industry and all this sort of thing is very, not quite monopoly, but like as close to monopoly as you kind of get, because there's only so many companies that are going to fly you places, and I know where I live, there's only like 3, and most of them use Boeings. So it's like you really have no other way of air travel if you choose or have to use that form of travel. So it's like people were afraid and were largely forced to, even if they didn't really want to. And but at the end of the day, like, lots of people I know picked to no longer use air travel if they could. They drove places. And at the end of the day, that affects how much money these airline companies had, which would affect their opinion of purchasing Boeing planes, which then would affect the shareholders. And so whistleblowers, not good for the company. They don't want that. I feel like that's pretty obvious. And so, those complaints could have reduced the value of the company, could have reduced the value of the stocks and all these sorts of things. And that's incredibly important to these large-scale companies. And if it was found that they had committed crimes as well, in either their improper manufacturing or perhaps labor concerns or, so on and so forth, OSHA violations, they could have faced incredibly hefty fines for these things that at the end of the day wouldn't have made a huge dent in their revenue, but they still don't want to pay those if they don't have to, of course. I think a lot of fines are not effective in their goals in actually changing behavior, because usually it's cheaper to continue that behavior and just pay the fine and hide it better. But they still don't want to have to bother to do that. It's annoying for the company, and it also still, again, reflects badly on their shareholders. And they might have had to change their operations, which would have further been more expensive. They would have had to pay the fine, and then they would have had to potentially train staff differently or purchase new equipment, mattering on whatever the issue was. It would have been a real pain for them. And so I think a lot of the consequences that came from this was extremely minimal. The FAA, which was the Federal Aviation Administration, which is the one that handles these complaints, largely ruled in favor with Boeing, which, shocker, I know. They did agree with Barnett on the improper tracking of parts. There were several parts that were just missing, and they had no idea where they went. But no true repercussions were faced. They just made a suggestion for Boeing to do better in the future. What's that gonna do? And most of the other claims were largely dismissed, especially after they died and they could no longer fight for these claims. They were largely tossed to the side, sort of thing. And so whether you want to argue that's because these claims were unfounded, or if you want to argue that Boeing pulled some strings with the FAA, do with that with what you please. Because in a lot of my research, I could not, specifically find a lot of that, but we would likely not know anyways, because it would likely have been illegal if Boeing had bribed or coerced FAA members to not take their claims very seriously. Of course, we wouldn't know about that. And so, that's up to your own interpretation. A lot of this is up to your own interpretation, whether you believe that the whistleblowers were targeted or whether you think it was horrible tragedies that happened to happen at these specific times in their lives. And whether you want to think that the FAA was bribed, or if you want to think that these claims were unfounded, or simply that the FAA are just not very good at their jobs, could also be that they're just not very good at investigating. I could also see that. You know, it's up to you what you think about this, but I think this song definitely leans towards the more nefarious goings on with Boeing. And of course, now their planes fall out of the sky constantly still, whether they're Boeing or not. This seems to be a reoccurring issue in the last couple of years for whatever reason. And I know Trump's cuts on a lot of like aviation workers and all that sort of thing, and lack of training is a huge issue in the industry, which is not specifically related to these Boeing whistleblowers, I feel, but is still definitely worthy to mention. Everyone be safe out there, and I suppose there is really no safe way to travel. Take a train. Take a train if you have to go somewhere. That's the best way to travel. You'll be fine on a train. No one dies on trains. And now that I've said that, in like a day, there's going to be a news story that a train derailed. Sorry about that. Alright, hope you have a good day and enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.